be honest with you here. I'm not going to think a lot about football this weekend. I've got family home for Christmas. The Steelers obviously don't play. Ravens don't play. There aren't games somewhere else that affect anything that happens here, really. Not all that much anyway. But Mike Tomlin and his coaching staff, they got a lot to think about. And that starts, yesterday. Good morning to you. Good Friday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into hockey and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Penguins and Pirates, the other two teams in town that I cover. And this team's made a mess. And just because I'm going to focus on Tomlin and the coaches today, it doesn't mean they haven't made a mess at field level as well. I'm going to bluntly spit this out here. If these guys, especially these guys on defense, have an issue with Cam Sutton and or anybody else on their side of the ball, they need to take care of business. They need to do it without running to the cameras and microphones and people like me. Look, we appreciate it. Makes for headlines and all that other stuff. Makes for a nice, easy couple of episodes of Daily Shot. Doesn't mean it's the best thing for business, as in their business, which I'm told by Tomlin on a regular basis is winning football games. The players have plenty to do here. But the decisions, what actually ends up occurring, what changes actually get made, not just promised, not just discussed, not just debated internally, actually get made, that's done principally at the head coach level. And the head coach needs to do something here in these next few days that he's done. Wow, if I were to go back over the tenure of covering this man, I can honestly recall no more than a couple situations that are even a little similar. And both of those are pretty far back. The most recent one being 2013 in London, after the Steelers started that season 0-4. No one cares. I'm going to repeat this because I really, really want this to be the one thing that gets absorbed from this specific segment. No one cares whether or not you, Mike Tomlin, were right or wrong about this or that leading into this current scenario. No one cares. Outside of course, Mike Tomlin. And that obviously doesn't matter. So I don't care that Tomlin invested so much capital, draft capital, emotional capital, verbal capital, snaps capital into Najee Harris, and that he's going to look as if he's tacitly admitting that he was wrong about Najee being his main guy by starting Jaylen Warren next Sunday against the Bengals, with an eye toward, incidentally, starting him in that first playoff game. You could start anybody against that Cincinnati defense and they're going to make you look good. This has to be done for the purpose of best preparing this offense for that playoff game. I don't care that Tomlin will look wrong for having been, the guy who was most responsible for bringing Sutton back into the fold, even after Sutton was deemed guilty enough by the National Football League of spousal abuse to the extent that he was suspended for half a season. That didn't happen for no reason. That didn't happen because the league's investigators came up with nothing. I said this at the time, and half of everybody bit my head off, and I'm saying it now. No matter where it is that you happen to rank something as sickening as spousal abuse on your own personal list of offenses, or where you prioritize it, as applied to, football, one of the risks that you take in bringing someone like this in is that they're troubled. They have to be troubled. And I can tell you that Cam is not the same individual. He doesn't act the same. He's not speaking the same. He sure isn't playing the same. His teammates clearly see this. His head coach, for whatever reason, has chosen to not see this or not want to see this, and definitely to not act on it. Beanie Bishop had 3 interceptions in 2 games and then was told to sit for this guy. Beanie isn't perfect. Beanie started off the season with some significant struggles of his own, but not one of them, according to absolutely everybody, was ever related to being fully invested in the process. Only the head coach can make that change. That can't come from the players. That can't come from Terrell Austin. Only Tomlin can do that. Only Tomlin can look across the group of wide receivers around George Pickens and say who should be out there. It's not a great group, but I can't be convinced that Mike Williams should be taking a back seat to Van Jefferson. Only Tomlin can look across the offensive line and say, you know what, I get these other guys that we have are backups, they're spare parts, we see them in practice every day. But is it possible that if we suited up one of them instead of a Broderick Jones or even instead of a Dan Moore who had a really, really rough day against the Chiefs, even if all those backups do, or one backup in favor of one of those starters, even if all they do is go out there and just survive, if they don't give up any sacks, if they don't get your quarterback killed, maybe they can make that difference. That can't be decided by Pat Meyer. That can't be decided by Arthur Smith. That has to be from Tomlin. So he can say whatever it is that he wants, as he did at the press conference on Christmas about, we're open to all kinds of things and we're ready to dig into and re-examine all of our options. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. This is the time when the leader of the outfit has to lead. I'll throw quarterback into that. And I'm not going to be an idiot here and suggest that Justin Fields take over for Russell Wilson in Week 18. Now, I am going to suggest that you be open-minded to other ways that you can utilize Justin Fields. That means as a quarterback, obviously. But how often he's out there, in what situations he's out there. Maybe when the other team gets really comfortable collapsing on Russ, you throw Justin out there to actually bust out of the pocket, give him a little bit of a scare. Russ thinks he can still bust out of the pocket. He can't. But I'm going to come back to this before we go to break. I want this one more time to be pushed because I'm sorry, don't take this the wrong way. There's just too big a percentage of this fan base that every time the Steelers lose just does nothing other than pile on to the head coach. And no matter how much you hate him, and for that matter, no matter how much you're right, it's not even remotely a reflection of reality. Everybody's had a role in this. Everybody. No exceptions. I liked this yesterday from Keanu Benton over on the South Side.
Just making plays, I think it adds up. Play after play, guys believing in each other, and you realize that everything that we put up or that we did to this point is actually worth it, and it actually works. We just had a bad game.
Yeah, the players have to be in on this. The players have to be front and center on this, actually. But it's incumbent on the head coach to make not good, but great choices between now and next weekend. When we come back, J1Q. Luxembourg, Garbett, Kelly & George is a personal injury law firm in Western Pennsylvania that represents injured people in automobile accidents, workers' compensation cases, and medical malpractice claims. The attorneys at Luxembourg, Garbett, Kelly & George pride themselves in doing what they say they're going to do. It's important to them that when they make you a promise, they keep that promise. And this law firm has been keeping promises for over 80 years. Luxembourg, Garbett, Kelly & George has been AV rated. That's the highest rating a law firm can receive for legal ability and ethics. And the lawyers at the firm have been designated super lawyers, that's a real thing, for over 15 years. Rare combination there. Luxembourg, Garbett, Kelly & George has offices in Cranberry, Newcastle, Beaver Falls, Butler, and Elwood City. Learn more about them at lgkg.com or by calling 888-842-5454. Again, that's 888-842-5454. Today's J1Q comes from David Hidalgo, who says, DK, I really like to hear you preach what we are thinking. This is the second worst offense I've ever seen. Yes, the only one worse is the Matt Canada-led offense. This is ridiculous. Is Mike Tomlin having too much input And the offense, is Arthur Smith really this bad? David, I want to start off, and I'm sorry if this comes across as a little nitpicky, but this one always raises an antenna for me. He says, at the beginning, I really like to hear you preach what we are thinking. I know you mean well by the statement, but I don't do that. I don't ever preach what anybody else is thinking. I only preach what I'm thinking. I'm not attempting to be anybody's voice for anything. If our stances happen to align, okay, that's not why I'm doing this. I'll often take a stance that I know for a fact is not what most people are thinking. I don't do it on purpose. It just happens to be that I feel differently. So I'm never, ever going for preaching what we are thinking, as you put it. The offense is the brainchild and the process of Smith. If you have an issue with the offense, and it sure sounds like you do, David, you have an issue with Smith more than anyone else. I've said this for years. I'm going to repeat it now. Tomlin is way more involved with the defense than he is with the offense. Tomlin is definitely not sitting there, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or any days scripting offensive plays. It's not his nature, not his area of expertise. That's according to him. Tomlin's involvement is going to be to contribute opinions about the other side, who it is that they're facing, what it is that they might want to avoid, what it is that they might want to attack. And he's going to have thoughts, as well as, of course, the final say on schemes, personnel, and usage. And that's why in the opening segment, I went straight to him in describing the decision that has to be made regarding the running backs. In my view, that decision's already been made. Unless I misread Tomlin in that room on Christmas Day, he strongly suggested that the Steelers had committed to Jaylen Warren to be their guy in the second half, to ride him as the hot hand. So within that, what I'm suggesting here is that Tomlin drops the whole hot hand thing and just says Jaylen Warren's our guy. If any of this sounds familiar, it's because I was doing a lot of the same stuff back when it was the Mason Rudolph versus, Kenny Pickett and all that other late season drama, where Tomlin would only acknowledge that Rudolph was the hot hand instead of just saying he's the starter, because he's so, I'll say it here, afraid of ever looking like he's wrong, or ever coming across as if he's been wrong, even if the evidence is just overwhelming to illustrate clearly that he's wrong. And that whole affair reached the obscene extreme where it felt like he was willing to lose games to show that he wasn't wrong, that he was going to stick by something no matter what. And if you need further evidence of this being one of his traits, there was still the unsightly way, I thought it was really unsightly actually, that he handled in publicly when Russell Wilson started playing well this season. Remember his line at the press conference, "I'm very well compensated for a reason." And he was the one letting people know that the decision that he made to go to Russ was not necessarily a popular one within his coach's room. He was the one. He was pretty much crowing about it. I don't know that that's stretching the meaning of that word. He was crowing. It's really, really important to him to be right. And we're going to find out a lot in the coming week as to what he legitimately sees as a desperate enough situation for him to carry himself a little bit differently, particularly when it comes to the actual decisions. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Steelers all week long. Hope you had a good holiday. We will be back with another one of these on Monday.